DonInLondon, hello. My video for September the 17th, all about recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour. My addictive substance, alcohol. My behaviour could be equally addictive around people, places and things. So, alcohol, I don't take a drink one day at a time. And this thing of people, places and things. Trying to be with the right people in the right place, doing the right things, having the right things, experiencing the right things. Well, no longer driven mad by the desire to be in the right place, with the right people, doing the right things. More often than not, today, needs met, wants forgotten. Well, so what are my basic needs today? Well, in recovery, not to take a drink, not to be troubled by wondering if I ought or can or should or need or desire or feel the compulsion and craving again for drink. I don't. Well, on a one-day basis only, because tomorrow might be stressful, full of tragedy, full of joy. I don't know. I don't quite know what's going to happen tomorrow. So the only day I've got to see whether life can work is now. And if life is working now without a drink, well, why not? So no longer tethered to a substance or a behaviour. No longer driven mad to try and fit in and try fix myself by fitting in, bending myself out of shape probably, and feeling less than, not good enough, all those negatives. I don't have to feel that way today. I may do, depending on what happens, but more likely, because my attitude and behaviour keeps on changing towards the positive of life rather than focusing on the negative of life. The positive keeps me on track, being myself. Indeed, learning more about who I am on a daily basis. So if you ask me in the morning, who am I, what do you stand for, I can only answer from history. But if you ask me a bit later on, midday, in the evening, I may know a little bit more about what keeps me safe, or makes me happy, or is making me sad. Indeed, life is in the moment rather than in history, wondering or worrying if I can ever get to be the person I used to be, or get to the person you think I ought to be. All those queries around life seem to have disappeared. So living in the moment seems appropriate. How did I stop drinking? Well, with my own knowledge, with my own self-will, with my own willpower, it seemed impossible to stop, because no matter what I did, I was back at the bar, the pub, the off-licence, the market, buying more alcohol, because I just couldn't stop. It was unbearable. Life was just unbearable. I just didn't feel right about myself, and in the end all I wanted was oblivion, and hopefully not waking up in the morning. Days, weeks, months of not wanting to be here, and sometimes it seemed to go on for years. So quite a change in circumstances, and simply by giving up something which I thought was my best friend, alcohol. And as I say, I tried to do it on my own and failed miserably, so I turned to family, friends, professionals, doctors, counsellors, psychiatrists, for a way out, a thinking man's way out of addiction. And it didn't seem to work at all, because it was all about putting the power back in me to be self-determined, self-willed and strong, being strong against something over which I had no defence. And it turned out that I was barking up the wrong tree completely. In fact, I was completely barking mad. And then I encountered a fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. I don't represent it, can't, never will, but I share about how it helps me on a daily basis with the simple steps to stay sober, so that I have good principles to live to, so my life is working today. I'm not bigger, not smaller than anybody else. I don't have bigger problems or less problems than anyone else. I do have chronic conditions besides addiction, by virtue of living long enough to get them or have them diagnosed properly. So the great gift of sobriety is, once the alcohol was out of me, and there was this horrible great big gap or hole in me where there used to be an ocean or a sea of alcohol, there's now some emptiness, and the great desire to fill it full of rubbish again, fixing myself so I would feel better, was obviously there. But I persevered with this emptiness, and suddenly found that there is usefulness in emptiness. That is the ability to keep on learning what is good for me. And I can only do that most often in the moment of what's going on now. So the Fellowship of AA, as I say, I don't represent it, never can, never will. Full of unique, authentic people on their own life journey, living their own life experiences, and often sharing about them in fellowship, so I get the benefit of what works for others, so I can see what may work for me, and keep on track, sober, so life can keep on happening. And most importantly, how to love, how to be loved back, and useful in whatever capacity. That's how it is. Love and usefulness. What more do we want? Well, we probably want our own way, but that doesn't necessarily follow as being the best way. So we learn as we go. That's the great gift in fellowship. Nobody knows the answer until we get there, in the moment, and then it can change from what we thought it ought to be to what it really is. So how does hellowship or fellowship work for me? On this little card is the AA preamble. You can't see it too well. And inside it has the 12 steps for an individual to learn how to be open, honest and willing to face life as it is. And 12 traditions which are about unity, service and recovery, keeping the fellowship going. And on the back is the Serenity Prayer. And as God is mentioned quite a lot in some of the things I share about today, from this book, Daily Reflections, which is an AA literature book, plus my own thoughts. The issue of God is of great importance, whether you believe or not, because it's an understanding of powers greater than us which help us learn life. So, what about God? Well, I'll talk about that in a moment. First I want to share the AA preamble, which I will embellish as I go along to explain what it means to me. And what it means to me is I'm just one of many voices in fellowship, sharing what seems to be working today, as do other people. So it's always the many voices in the fellowship which make the difference. Not one voice, not one sponsor, not one person who we may latch onto because we like them. And that's perfectly okay, as long as it doesn't get in the way of one's sobriety. But only you can judge that, I can't. So it's not about me judging you in your way forward or your way backward. It's what you say. So what is AA? Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. So that's it, we share. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. So we all have a desire to stop drinking, maybe. Or maybe we're just trying out what we know is probably a good idea, but we don't like the idea of it. I know I didn't like the idea of fellowship, the very idea that people would know me better. And my problem of being an alcoholic was shameful, and it made me feel guilty that I was a failure. Indeed, that's the point. There is no shame or guilt in being an alcoholic. It's what we do about it, maybe, which can help us deal with old shame and guilt. So the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, and there are no laws, rules, regulations in fellowship. We are all trusted servants of equal size, no matter what we do, whether we just turn up, have coffee, eat biscuits and walk away, or do something to help organise meetings. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. So AA lives from day to day, with sometimes a prudent reserve, if we have any cash spare, to see us into the next month or so. We don't hoard money. That's another addiction we could get into, power and money. So we get round that by not having too much money ever. Yes, we are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. But everybody in the fellowship is associated with something, or has an idea about the life and how it is, and opinions and beliefs. And perfectly right, you should have all those things. They're a part of you and your life. But we don't try and impose them on other people. We acknowledge we all have them, but we share about experience, strength and hope. And ideally, so no matter what background we come from, we share something useful for ourselves and other people. Because the primary purpose, and as it says here, our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I know I labour this a lot when I do my videos, but I'm really trying to encourage you to see what is out there. What you see is what you get. The primary purpose, to be sober and share the message. And so often we are looking for faults, we're looking for the negative, we're looking for the get out of jail free card, which means we could go back to old behaviour maybe and not be an alcoholic. But I haven't found a way back to not being an alcoholic. All I found is recovery is better for me than the old ways. So I share a bit of the daily reflection for today. And September is all about step 9, making amends without doing further harm to people in our lives. So making restitution however we feel it's right to do so. So today's reflection, if you like, from the literature is about freedom from fear. And one of the things which kept me drinking was covering up the fear, putting on a brave face, and my ego covering up shame and guilt as well in the past. The not knowing the answer stuff. But with a drink inside me, I would try and bluff it through, bluff it out. Feel like I knew who I was for a few seconds, and then it would disappear again. So freedom from fear. When, with God's help, we calmly accept our lot, then we found we could live at peace with ourselves and show others who still suffered the same fears that they could get over, and that they could get over them too. We found that freedom from fear was more important than freedom from want. Yes, so if we don't fear, often our needs are met on a very basic level. Food, roof over our head, that sort of thing. Utilities paid as best we can. We may not have very much, but we don't have to fear if our needs are met. It's when we start wanting again that fear of not having enough or not being good enough starts to come back. Material values ruled my life for many years during my active alcoholism. And that's true, because it was all about the job, the amount of money I earned, and measuring my success in material and pounds sterling, or whatever currency it happened to be. I believed that all my possessions would make me happy, yet I still felt bankrupt after I obtained them, or they had a great collection of things, gadgets, and trying to be with the right people in the right place with the right things. Didn't make me happy. I always felt empty. I didn't really belong. I was a pretender. I was pretending to be okay. And that's a horrible admission when you've been spending, 35 years or so trying to make it look right, and you feel horrible, which is where I got to. And then the dam broke, and I just couldn't stop drinking in the end. When I first came into AA, I found out about a new way of living. As a result of learning to trust others, I began to believe in a power greater than myself, and that is the greater wisdom of the many. So power greater than me started to be the wisdom of the many. Having faith freed me from the bondage of self, so a bit of courage and faith, rather than fear and a brave face seemed to be better. So courage and faith, based on reality, that if I ask for help I may get it. If I ask for a better way of looking at what I'm trying to deal with, I am pondering more in the positive than the negative. As material gains were replaced by the gifts of the Spirit, which is, for me, spiritual is the ability to cope with and live in the now. And it was said by an Archbishop of Canterbury, when asked what is spiritual, he said, well, it's the ability to cope with what's going on right now. So everything is spiritual, good, bad, indifferent, horrible, tragic, wonderful and joyous. All those things can happen in one day. I then chose to share my experiences with other alcoholics, so it was about giving it away to keep it. And in giving it away, people shared their experience, strength and hope of how powers greater than them work. And some people believe in God, some people don't believe in God, some people just don't know. And either way, whatever works for you in terms of powers greater than you is what counts. As long as we remember, it's probably a good idea to know that it's okay not to know in life, rather than feel shamed by not knowing something beyond our life experience today. So, my thoughts for this day. I cannot describe or define God, nature, providence, or your higher power. And this is good news for me. My higher power is always now, available now, with elements of truth, love and wisdom. Truth, not my opinion or belief, so it's the absolute truth as it emerges, rather than what I think it ought to be. Love, how to love and be loved back. Absolutely the very essence of life, I guess. Wisdom from others and wisdom learned from experience. So truth, love and wisdom, a very good way to understand powers greater than me, or my higher power. So enough fear and a brave face when needed. Sometimes I do fear life and fear circumstances, that nervous itch which is good, but not overwhelming fear. And a brave face sometimes when people are going through tough times. To sit and cry with them may be less helpful, although I could say I feel like crying at what you're saying, but it won't help them. So just enough of a brave face to help when needed, because two breakdowns just make two breakdowns. One not breaking down, but the other one breaking down. One may help the other maybe, and then break down later. But we don't lose sight of how we feel about events. More courage and faith when I don't know. And, I do have more courage and faith. In fact, I positively embrace the idea of not knowing things. Because, somebody else probably does today. So if I don't try and answer something with a, a belief or opinion, I'm less likely to set people off on a track which is dangerous or unhelpful. Because if it's based on theory rather than practice, that's why we share experience, strength and hope. It's not about theory, it's about what do we do and what happens and how did we feel about it, and do we want to do that again, or do we need to modify and keep on growing. And again, covering up will keep me stuck in old ways. So if I try and cover up something, oh no, it wasn't me, or I didn't know that, but I'm not going to tell you, I'll still have these feelings of being guilty, inadequate and shamed when I do not know the answers most people seem to have. I'm mightily pleased when I don't know today. Indeed, that is, why else live if we don't have room to grow? So I'm mightily pleased when I don't know. It means I do not try to impress or fake it to fit in. Not knowing has proved to be my salvation, especially when I share and say so. The humility to keep learning, a great asset today. And going to a meeting and then hearing experience, strength and hope of someone who's got many more years in sobriety than me, but still feels all the usual stuff around what it's like to be in recovery, and not knowing, but knowing there are people out there who, even if they don't know the answer either, we can all walk tall finding out. So it can keep on finding out. And if it's things that don't help us, then we forget it sooner rather than later, rather than worrying over and over again that someone's going to find us out. We've already been found out in our own heads, and that's the only place that matters. What other people think of me is often said to be none of my business. And that has to be the way. It has to be the way. Otherwise, I will fear sharing my truth, even if it is just belief and opinion. Someone needs to tell me, that sounds like belief and opinion, Don, rather than the truth. And they're quite right. It's not quite lying, but it might be speculation which is unhelpful. Previous years, this is interesting. Hey, you, get off my cloud. Just because you believe in a certain way about a higher power, and you call it God, as you understand he, she or it. I put a question mark there. We leave our politics and religion at the door in fellowship and concentrate on sober. Remain unique and authentic in our outlook, and a higher power we come to understand for ourselves today. I might end up believing that, yes, you have the answer, that's how the higher power is, or God is. Or may not. That's okay. After all, fellowship and sobriety is about our uniqueness, our authenticity in the moment of now, in our own real life situations, what works for us. And what works for me is not knowing the answers most often, because then I can find out what the answers are for now. Freedom from fear with a higher power today, the higher power, a higher power I come to understand for myself. We may call it God, we may call it good conscience, and it somehow embodies truth, love and wisdom, which is where I got to. Doesn't mean that's the depth of my answer, because truth keeps on evolving. Love, how to love people and be loved back, keeps evolving, and wisdom certainly keeps evolving, because everything's changing. So I'm not stuck one way. Faith, courage and confidence to live one day, live well and in harmony as best I can, as you can with your higher power and the people around you. But if we say, God told me to do this, or God, it's obvious that God would want it this way, I don't know that is so helpful, because it's the God of your understanding and not mine. But if it includes truth, love and wisdom, we're probably on the same place in the same time, trying to resolve the same stuff. And that's what I find in fellowship more than anything. Similarities rather than differences. The great similarity, sober today, or just getting sober today, or decades sober today, depends on how long you've been in, or whether you've been out again for another go, a bit more research. And it's hard as hell, or it's as hard as it need be to find heaven. We get heaven and hell in any day, we could walk in front of a bus, we could see somebody do the same. In recovery, it's so easy to go back out and get sucked back into the life, which is made more difficult. Basically oblivion for me. I just don't know what the point would be, other than addiction is something which doesn't go away. And once a drink is taken, the craving and the overwhelming desire to drink will come back. So there's no easy way out. But the good news in sobriety is happiness is optional, misery is optional. Or is it? It's happy or miserable as the life circumstances we face are. So sometimes happy, sometimes sad. Better sober, because at least then I know the difference about what can happen next. Find out how to get back on track, whatever track it happens to be for that or this particular day. Enough of me for this September 17th. I always finish with the Serenity Prayer, because it's the can do, can't do, wisdom to know the difference. What I can do, I can change my attitude and behaviour and outlook, and my feelings change as a consequence, or my feelings are the way they are, which impacts the way I behave. I can't change you, your attitudes or behaviour, or the way you feel, and you can be around that issue, your attitudes, behaviour, emotional and spiritual. So I guess, and I sort of understand that feelings are something I am powerless over. Feelings are the way they are, and then my thinking is influenced by sadness, joy, whatever. Same goes for everyone, really. And that if we do something different, feelings can modify and change as life changes. So if you're looking for the chicken and egg in all of this, please do. I've stopped, because it serves no purpose. If I know and ask myself, how am I feeling when I wake up? Happy, sad, in pain, whatever it is, how am I feeling? Why? What may I do? I'm being assertive about what is possible. And if I'm waking up with other people or meeting other people, it's empathy. How are we feeling? Why? What can we do? Empathy. Knowing our feelings, understanding them better as life and experience matures us, we broaden, deepen, widen life. And it's all just for today. So the serenity prayer to God or in good conscience, can do, can't do, wisdom to know the difference. So God or in good conscience, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference for me in the moment and just for today.